Yeah, no, the recent developments on Site C have a couple of different explanations that one could look to. One is, the one that media tends to look at, is that the Trudeau Liberals federally see defending Site C at this point as being on the same side as John Horgan. So in a manifestly childish maneuver, they don't want to go to court on the side of protecting the Site C permits to the federal government. Now, the other explanation is that our Minister of Justice, Jody Wilson-Raybould, is truly troubled by being in a court case where West Moberly First Nation is looking for their rights, and intervening against their rights is something that she would rather not do. Every single minister in the Trudeau cabinet had a mandate letter that said, and I think I know it verbatim, there is no relationship more important to this government than our relationship with Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. That if that's their most important relationship, I'd hate to see one they didn't care about. So that leaves us with a couple of different scenarios now. I certainly, the original permits for Site C were granted after the writ dropped in the 2015 election. They were granted by Stephen Harper's cabinet in defiance of an extremely strong environmental assessment report that told them that the environmental damage could not be mitigated and it would include loss of First Nations rights as described in treaty, but that many of those issues were beyond the mandate of the Environmental Assessment Panel. I want to reiterate, because so much misreporting has gone on about this, including a piece today I saw in the newspaper that said that this was a really poorly done, inadequate environmental assessment. That is not the case. It was done under the Canadian Environmental Assessment Law as it existed before Harper wrecked it, and the Environmental Assessment Panel, chaired by Harry Swain, did an admirable job. What happened was that Stephen Harper's cabinet decided to ignore the warnings of the Environmental Assessment Panel and grant the permits during a federal election. That alone should have been scandalous. I met with the ministers in the Trudeau administration virtually as soon as they were appointed to say, whatever you do, do not approve Site C. As a matter of fact, I only know that the permits were all granted during the writ period because I asked Transport Minister Mark Garneau to release them to me, and he did. He put them on the public website, and that's how we know the timing of the first round of permits. The second round of permits in August of 2016 were, in my view, entirely related to Kinder Morgan and were part of the great political deal-making swap. It was no more virtuous than let's make a deal. It was Rachel needs a pipeline, so we'll make sure she gets Kinder Morgan. Meanwhile, Christy doesn't want a pipeline, so to make her take something she doesn't want because her 5 conditions aren't met yet, the federal Liberals will approve wood fiber LNG, Petronas LNG, and Site C, because those were all things Christy wanted. So Rachel needs a pipeline, Christy needs LNG and Site C. None of these were properly reviewed by the Liberals. It was just let's make a deal. So where we are right now, it's anybody's guess. Certainly hoping that the courts see the virtue of the injunction that West Moberly First Nation is asking for. LNG, fracked LNG, it has a higher carbon footprint than coal because of all the methane emissions in the production and the fracking and the breaking of the fractured areas. And of course, there's the water contamination issue. There are many issues about fracking. We should ban fracking across Canada. New Brunswick has a ban on fracking. Nova Scotia has a ban on fracking. Quebec has a ban on fracking. Why is the British Columbia New Democratic Party government pushing fracking and LNG as though this is a big economic winner? It's not an economic winner, and it's a big climate loser. And now we have the betrayal of John Horgan in approving Site C against the very good advice he got from the BC Public Utilities Commission that Site C wasn't needed and alternatives were cheaper. The way was open for John Horgan to say no to Site C, and he said yes. And that was a devastating thing for all of us as Greens. We were devastated. But as you can see, it may turn out that the courts save us. My fingers are crossed.